Our next and final speaker for today is Kristin Carlton. She's with the Planning and Development Review Department. She's a landscape inspector, and she's in charge of the south side of Austin, south of the river. There is an inspector for the north side, a position actually that's being interviewed for as we speak. She's been with the city for 15 years. She's studied landscape architecture. She's a licensed irrigator, and she's been inspecting landscapes for 12 years. So please welcome Kristin Carlton. This one goes forward. This one goes back. Oops. Did I go
back one more?
There you go. Perfect. And then this one down here will advance it too.
Okay. I know this ordinance backwards and forwards. And when Denise asked me to speak at this seminar, I got a little nervous because usually my venue is outside on site and it's dusty or it's cold or it's windy or it's blazing hot, and I'm just not used to this controlled environment. So I'll try not to confuse you because I'm just used to a different venue, even though the material is the same. I'm going to talk about the commercial landscape ordinance that the City of Austin has. It's a zoning ordinance. And because it's a zoning ordinance, it doesn't apply to any commercial site unless it's zoned, which means it's in the city limits. The City of Austin, all cities have a proper city limits, and everything in that city limits should be zoned. Anything outside that line is called the ETJ, and it's unzoned. So this ordinance does not apply to anything in the ETJ. The only thing that would apply, and that's why I have these pictures, are irrigation. Irrigation criteria is we have to protect the water supply as irrigators. That's a health, safety, and welfare issue. So if you do install an irrigation system on a commercial site in the ETJ, it is inspected by a plumbing inspector. The state TCUQ, which governs irrigators, gives plumbers the same rights as a licensed irrigator. So your plumbing inspector, the guy who's looking at your shower and your bathroom and anything else on that site, he's going to inspect that irrigation system. The only thing in the ETJ would be tree preservation, which is not in my ordinance. So, but you may have tree issues, protected trees and heritage tree issues on your site. This also does not apply to any subdivisions. They're not considered commercial sites. I mean, a subdivision can be developed for single family. Definitely no landscape criteria there. If the subdivision is developed for commercial construction and it's in the city limits, you're going to see me or the other inspector. In order to landscape, you have to apply for what they call a site plan permit. And a site plan is a set of drawings. They're called a civil set. And those drawings comply with all the criteria it takes to do site work, to build a commercial site. And the landscape plan is one of those sheets. Too often, when we show up for our inspections, we see plant material installed, and sometimes we can just tell by looking, it doesn't look quite right, but we're there to do the inspection, and we ask for the plan, and our customers will provide us with a landscape plan that wasn't permitted. It's a plan somebody else did. The developer or the owner or whoever didn't like that plan they saw in the city set, and they wanted to do something different. And so they handed this to their contractor. If you'll notice on this slide, I'm going to go to the next one, but there's a little box down in the bottom right corner. That is called the site plan release. That is your site plan permit. And if you don't see that on your drawings to install the landscape, you have the wrong set of plans if it's a commercial site, and you have to comply with the city landscape ordinance. If that's not on there and signed, all those signatures and dates, then you have the wrong set of plans. And if I come to do the inspection and you've used the wrong set, there's a good chance you're not going to pass. And you might not pass. You might have complied. It may be a copy of this. It's just they didn't put the site plan release. Or it may have acceptable plant material that's been substituted and all put in the right place. And you'll see as we get through this presentation that placement is sometimes well, it is important, placement of certain plant material, because we have buffering and shading requirements. So I just want to make you aware of that. I don't know how many installers are in here, contractors or irrigators, but or developers that need to relay that, message to their customers, but it's very important that you install the right set of plans. That first sentence where it says there is not a typical city-approved landscape plan, there's not, because all sites are different. There's so many constraints on a site, from topography to just, like this site, surrounded by street, totally by street. But I must say that the commercial landscape ordinance does not apply to the downtown central business district. So if you're north of the river and you're between 35 and Mopac and you're south of MLK, you don't have to comply with the landscape ordinance, with this commercial landscape ordinance. But what you do have to comply with are the Chapter E commercial design guidelines, and that's where all these street trees come from that you see downtown and north of here. You see these street trees in containers or, in tree wells. Those are completely different standards, and that's not part of this ordinance. However, if the plant material is shown on my plan, which it has to be, then we'll be inspecting it. But still, it needs that site plan release at the, in the bottom corner. Some of the basic elements of the landscape ordinance are shown up there, and we're going to try to go through those, and I'm going to try to explain them without really having a sheet in my hand or a laser pointer to point out the different areas. And I know it might be difficult, but we're going to try. But you have street yard requirements, buffer requirements, you have parking lot shading requirements, plant selection is required, you have a certain list to use, soil conditioning and mulching, protection of landscape areas, and irrigation. Street yard requirements, I don't know how well you can see this, but I'm going to point from here. This is a taco cabana, and you can see that on the left side is 620, and on the bottom is 4 Points Drive. So this site is on a corner. And if you can see the building, it's called the Taco Cabana. You can see that logo in the middle. The street yard is the area between the building face and the street it faces. And so this has two street yards. It has the 620 street yard because you have the front of the Taco Cabana all the way out to the curb. And then you have this side of the building all the way out to the curb of 4 Points Drive. Can y'all see that? I think you can. So that's called the street yard. And within the street yard is where your parking goes, your shade trees go there, what we call buffer planting goes there. Buffer planting is a linear buffer. It's a vegetative buffer between the edge of the parking lot and the right-of-way line, which is the street. That's where your buffer planting goes. And it's a linear measurement. On this one, literally, you would just measure the linear foot from the property line on the top of 620 all the way around to where the property line hits 4 Points Drive. It's just a linear foot measurement. So the two things I'm going to show you on the next slide is how the buffer is determined, how much plant material goes in there, how you translate that 600 linear feet or whatever it is into planting, and then the street yard calculations. The street yard, is the building face between the street, and you have to have so many trees in the street yard. If you have existing trees that are of a certain size, that takes the credit of planting a new tree. So it's all very, calculated, and it can be very confusing if you don't understand these plans, and that's why I hope I can explain it. Okay, good. This is the sheet that will show you the landscape calculations, and on the next slide, I've made those bigger so you can see. But this sheet has your plant list that includes all the plant material that you're required to plant. It has the planting details that shows you, to do a mulch ring and to backfill the soil, the tree well with, good soil, how they're to be staked. That's very important to us, how you stake your trees. we don't require you to stake them at all. But if you do stake them, we like that stake to be parallel to the ground and not at an angle. There's way more stress from wind to a tree that's been staked at an angle than one that's been staked parallel to the ground. So this one detail on here is wrong. Can you see it? The one in the middle, the tree planting detail, that is wrong. Just because it's on there and it's wrong doesn't mean that we're not going to say restake your trees. Okay, these are the landscape calculations, and when you look at those, it looks like a bunch of gobbledygook, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it's hard to make sense of it, but you can see if you go down about 6 or 7 lines under trees, you see that existing tree credit, a 2-inch diameter to a 6-inch diameter tree would get you some credit. They don't have any that small. 6-inch diameter, they have 15. Can y'all see that? They have 15 trees, 6 inches in diameter or greater. So they got some credit for that. And it's a point system, and so it just depends on the size of the square footage that you see in those top numbers of how many trees they need. You can see replacement trees. It's because they cut down a great number of existing trees. And when you see replacement trees, required caliper inches replaced, 430, that means they cut down enough existing trees, 8 inches in diameter or greater, that totaled up to that total caliper inches. All trees on site 8 inches or greater have to be surveyed and located. That's measured 4.5 feet off the ground. So the way we do that, we find on our bodies where 4.5 feet is, and on me it's about right here. So when I measure an existing tree, I know where to put my tape and measure the caliper of that tree. That's a very important item there, the replacement trees. And 430 inches on a site that small, that's a lot of trees. Oh, we don't have the plan in front of us. Let's go back. So you can see all those big circles are newly planted trees. So that's a lot of replacement. Then looking at this same chart, I want you to look at the buffer points. And the buffer point on this one required was 325. That means there's 325 linear feet along the curb of that site. 325 linear feet translates into this point system. And as you can see, large trees, 3 inches, they planted 11. They got 9 points for each tree, so that was 99 points on the right side of the chart. So they're providing, I see the required is 325, they're providing 440 buffer points. That's more than they need. So if they want to go over and above, that's fine. But they can't include street yard trees or the replacement trees in those figures. Yes, in this buffer, on these buffer points, yeah. Did that? They're not supposed to be, but so say you had some extra inches in the tree, then those extra inches would count. Yeah, it is, and you've probably seen it where it is counted. I don't do the reviews, I just do the inspection, So it's not supposed to be counted double credit, It's supposed to be on what was removed should be replaced, and what's required in addition to that, it should be planted. But you've probably seen it where it is counted. Yeah. So, but those are the rules that, get interpreted by someone else. Okay. As far as plant selection, native and adapted drought-tolerant species is what we want to see. And in order to accomplish that, we have 2 plant lists. One of them is the City of Austin Preferred Plant List. It's the Appendix N of the Environmental Criteria Manual, which that's where the landscape ordinance is. That list was developed in 1996, and I can say it's not the best list. There's some really inappropriate plant material on there because at that time, that's all that was available, and that's what people use. And it was, I can't even say it was the best choice at that time, but it was commercially available and it was deemed, satisfactory. Since then, there's been many new varieties discovered and adapted to this climate that you can commercially buy and install. A lot of those are in the Grow Green Guide, and that is an excellent guide for plant material. The only caveat with that publication, and Denise didn't know this till I showed her this yesterday, is palms are not considered a tree or a plant that is required to comply with the landscape ordinance. Palms are not trees. They're a grass. Technically, they're a grass, giant grass. And they don't really do well in parking lot situations, and that's what you want your shade trees for. A pecan or a cedar elm or a live oak, they're going to give you much more shade in a high heat environment where there's a lot of concrete. And palms really don't do that anyway. But just remember that if you install a palm instead of a tree, you will probably hear your landscape inspector have a fit and a heart attack because they are beautiful. People like them. They're a great architectural statement, but they are not allowed. And, you'll have to go to great expense to replace them. So I hope that you tell all your friends when you leave here. As far as trees, the City of Austin Preferred Plant List has a great list of native trees, large trees and small ornamental trees that are native. That's a very good list. Let's see. So that covers the street yard, I hope, and placement of plant material. I guess what I didn't talk about was shading. You are required to have a shade tree within 50 feet of every parking space. So let's go back to this one. And as you can see, in the parking islands, they're usually spaced 50 feet, and there's a shade tree put in every one of those, as well as this site has so many trees required that even if you didn't get them in those parking islands, you would meet your 50-foot because those on the edge count as shading. Okay, let's see. Soil conditioning and mulching. I know you were all here, I think you were all here for Matt Holland's talk. And there are going to be some amendments to the landscape ordinance. Those have not been adopted yet, and it will change how people landscape their site. And one of those changes is soil depth. Right now, you're required to install 4 inches of topsoil, but one of those changes is to make that 6 inches. And part of that is the soil around here is horrible, and by the time a site is constructed, it's all been scraped away. I mean, what little you may have is usually scraped away. It's not stockpiled, which I think is a great idea. Some sites do that, and then they put it back at the end of construction, and it's full of all kinds of native seeds, and when you want to revegetate a natural area, that's one of the best things you can do. Save your topsoil and then put it back, because there's so many viable seeds that have just been there for years waiting in that soil to germinate and revegetate a site. You must use an organic mulch in this ordinance, in the landscape ordinance, and an organic mulch is a bark mulch or anything from plant material. A gravel mulch is not acceptable. I know you see it all over town, but the landscape ordinance says an organic mulch, and gravel is not considered an organic mulch. And yes? Right now, that is being reviewed with the review staff, the land use review staff. It's opened a huge can of worms just in the last 6 months. If you've ever had a commercial inspection and you put granite gravel instead of an organic mulch, and you had that discussion with one of us, you know that We really toe the line on that, only because we agree that an organic mulch is better for your plant material than a gravel mulch. We got my coworker, Susan Kinzel. Is she here? Does anyone see Susan here? She was the new landscape inspector with us for 8 months, and then she got another job with the city. But she got a soil thermometer. We got to buy a soil thermometer, and we went around and took the temperature of granite gravel mulch with irrigation in the same conditions as a bark mulch with irrigation. And during this hot summer, we found that granite gravel could be anywhere from 8 to 10 degrees hotter on a hot day, even with irrigation. And when it gets as hot as it's been getting, and it's just a cooking situation. You know, plant roots have a lethal temperature that once they reach a certain temperature, they can die. And we've seen it happen. So the best use for a granite gravel mulch, in my opinion, is those plants that have a high lethal temperature of the roots. Those are the best plants for granite gravel mulch. And it will probably come that we do have a distinction. We have a list of plant material that's appropriate for that, and a list that's not. If granite gravel is shown on your plan, if it's shown on your landscape plan, then you need to put it in. And the reason it may be shown is because Austin Energy's Grow Green and LEED program, to get those points, require you to use a lot of gravels instead of turf. And if it's on the plan, we're going to accept it. But I will tell you, we will require you to mulch your trees, pull it up, and mulch your trees with a bark mulch and remove the gravel just within the drip line, because it is a better environment for that tree's survival, the roots, and all the benefits that a decomposing bark mulch provide to trees and their roots. Protection of landscape areas is basically protecting your landscape and your irrigation within a parking lot. And you are required to put some sort of barrier, at least 6 inches in height. And if it's not a curb and gutter, a lot of times these sites don't have curb and gutter for water quality reasons. You'll see the ribbon curb because the only way to get it to drain is so that the water flows over those. But if it's in a parking lot and it's adjacent to landscape areas, it's going to have irrigation in it and plant material. And you know as well as I do that quicker than anything, cars will park where they're not supposed to, or just hit that area in driving when they go around curves or these tiny little parking spaces that are so popular now. Everybody parks in those whether they're supposed to or not. So the way you get around that, and in order for the water to still drain, is asphalt curbs is a solution, which I've never seen. I've never seen somebody come in and pour an asphalt curb. I've seen them put railroad ties, and they have to put it off the paving in where the turf or the plant material is. Rock or stone curbs, like that. I know those are huge. We do accept smaller ones than that, but that's a perfect solution so that the water can still flow and vehicles won't get in there and mess it up. Bollards, you can put a bollard space no more than 4 feet, just so a car axle can't get through there. And then wheel stops. You can put wheel stops to prevent vehicles from going into those areas. You're required to do an automatic in-ground irrigation system to comply with the landscape ordinance. The only sites that don't have to comply with that are sites that are less than a half acre. You can use the hose bib. And sometimes there's a little wiggle room on that. If it's 0.7, sometimes during the review process they negotiate that and will say, landscape is watered by a hose bib. And most of those sites, those small sites, they're small business owners. They've been able to somehow squeeze a business, develop a business on a small site. And I support this. Sometimes they're required to plant 3 trees and 4 shrubs because their site is so small. Their street yard and their buffer is so tiny that that's all they have to do. And they can keep those plants alive with a hose bib. When we arrive to do your inspection, The irrigation system, it must be in place and it must be operational. You must have a meter installed. You can't be irrigating off the fire hydrant because, number one, that's not your permanent supply. And the pressure will change dramatically when you take it off that fire hydrant. So if you call us and that's the case, you won't pass. You also won't pass if you don't have permanent power. A lot of times we show up and there's this huge orange extension cord plugged into the controller, stretched across the site. And they are keeping their landscape alive with the electricity that way, but it's not considered permanent. The second thing the irrigator has to provide for us is what we call the Commercial Irrigation Inspection Checklist. And in 2008, the City of Austin, or Austin Water Utility, implemented some water conservation measures, and irrigation criteria got a little bit stricter. The next year, the state of Texas implemented some criteria, and they overlap. They're pretty similar. This list is a compilation of both. And so we put it back on the irrigator to fill this out and give it to us, certifying he's done all that. And basically, between the city's rules and the state's, they have to provide an as-built plan to their customer of the irrigation system. A lot of times after it's installed, to begin, the irrigator will draw an irrigation plan. After it's installed, sometimes it's installed differently. Things are in the way, maybe they change their plant layout, any of the zones change. So the plan changes, and you cannot inspect it that way. And so we require an as-built to be left with the owner. They need a seasonal water schedule and water budgets inside the controller box that we can look at. They need to be laminated. If the controller's outside, they need to be laminated. If the controller's inside, they don't. But if it's outside, they need to be laminated so that they become waterproof. There needs to be a sticker on the controller with the irrigator's contact info and his license number. Maintenance checklist in controller or with owner. In areas that are less than 6 feet wide and surrounded by impervious cover, it must be drip. No longer can sprays go in those areas. It's high waste of water. So it must be drip. It must have a master valve installed after the backflow device. That's in case there's a leak. If there's a leak in an irrigation system, you have all this piping and these zones, and if a pipe breaks, if there's not a master valve, the meter continues to feed water through there, and it just runs and runs and runs and wastes tons of water. So a master valve turns it off. It detects water flowing when the controller has not been turned on, and so it closes and won't let all that water leak out. Isolation valve installed between water meter and backflow. Hydrozoned. Hydrozone means that each zone, I have 15 minutes, okay. Each irrigation zone is properly sized and the precipitation rate is perfect for the plant material it's watering. Trees and shrubs in the shade require a completely different precipitation rate, the rate that the water's dispersed, than turf in full sun. So that's what we mean by hydrozone. Proper pressure. If irrigation system's not operating at the proper pressure, you just see tons of misting instead of water droplets. Misting, and it just goes into the air and is wasted. Head-to-head coverage means that the spray from one head overlaps with the spray from the next, so that there's no areas that don't get irrigated. No overspray onto surfaces where it can run off and go straight into the storm sewer. Hose bib backflow and isolation valve, if hose bib is installed, they don't always do that. We require a rain shutoff device so that when it rains, it's a sensor that does not allow the controller to irrigate when it's raining. We require an ET controller. That stands for evapotranspiration, and that is a controller that has a little cell phone capability or signal to a weather station, and that weather station monitors the rate of wind, the temperature, the amount of moisture already in the air, I guess humidity you might call it. There's an evapotranspiration rate for each day depending on the weather, and that's when your plants may need more or less water. And so those are required on a commercial site. When a contractor has installed all the plant material and all the irrigation, and this person wants a final inspection from landscape inspection, he is required to send us a letter of concurrence. And it must be under seal from a licensed engineer, architect, or landscape architect, stating that the project has been implemented in accordance with the approved plan. Until we get that letter, we won't schedule an inspection. And we won't even schedule the inspection if you tell us it's on the way, because it needs the name of the site and all the building permit numbers and, site plan number. There's a lot of information on that letter before we'll schedule. So that is a requirement that's been a requirement since 1996 when the ordinance was developed. However, we didn't start asking for that until 2002. So until then, there were a lot of failed inspections. This has really helped the rate of showing up the first time and somebody passes. Since I just have 15 minutes left, I kind of timed this right. I just added some slides that show the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is I don't know if you can see it, but those irrigation sprays are like 3 feet in the air to water this turf. And that's a huge, a situation where there can be a lot of overspray and a lot of water waste, especially if it's windy. So, right now nothing prevents somebody from doing that, but it sure would be nice if they didn't. This is a situation where if we've showed up on a final inspection, there's nothing but hazards in this slide. And this is a parking lot out at the airport. And as part of the landscape inspection, not only are we looking at the landscape, but we have to make sure the site is safe. And you can probably see the multiple hazards. Not only did that retaining wall fail, but they have those stub outs for their lights and another open trench. And this did not pass inspection because of this. Same slide, same situation there. This is a huge existing tree. This is a residential site. Unfortunately, we see this on commercial sites, and we're in a better position to get some sort of retaining wall to protect that tree than residential. If we showed up and we saw something like that on a tree that should be preserved, that slope is so great that this is along Riverside Drive. I don't know if any of you drive up and down Riverside, but this tree's still there like that. But that's a situation where you wouldn't pass either, only that's not a safe situation, especially in a commercial setting. Here is another situation where people pulled over and parked because there was no protection. And so not only did it kill any vegetation that was there, but it created a situation, in my opinion, this was on a slope. So as you go back, it went uphill. And all the erosion that took place just from the loose soil that was, there, people parking there, even though it's a fire lane, this was at a daycare. And a lot of the irrigation heads were busted and knocked over, not in this slide. What's this? This is, you can see along the back of the curb, can you see that white line? Can you see that? Under that silver car, that's irrigation pipe. Irrigation pipe should be a minimum of 6 inches deep, and so that's you would fail your inspection if we saw that. Just the other things that are going on in this slide is that wall was really built too close to those tree trunks, and we really don't like to see the compaction of the roots to be covered like that. I don't know why he did this. There was really a huge drop-off between the parking lot and the grade below it, but I don't know that he needed a retaining wall quite like that. This is my final slide. I'm going to end this talk. Everybody remember the first slide? Oops. Was a beautiful creek and waterfall out in Dripping Springs. This is a commercial site off of Southwest Parkway. And I don't know the name of this site, but this is a half-acre man-made lake with its own meter to fill it. And this was permitted probably 5 or 6 years ago, and I'm not sure Austin Water Utility know that they permitted a lake, but it does remain full at all times. And it's a huge waste of water. And as people that may be developing or may be responsible for a landscape, alternative forms of water have become more important than ever, and I see it on commercial sites, and John talked about it a little bit, but when you install a commercial landscape, especially now, we cannot stop you from installing the plant material and irrigating it, even though you have limited irrigation times. We can't stop you. All we can do is suggest that you hold off and you do what we call a developer's agreement, which is, it's a performance type contract. We assess a fiscal based on those landscape calculations, and in exchange for that fiscal, you get to occupy your building and your site, and then when you install everything and we get a letter of concurrence and you pass, you get all that money back. It's not a bribe. I don't get to keep it, as people have asked me where I was going. I said, nowhere. Not with this money, but yeah, it's really not funny. I don't get to keep it. The city keeps it. But we can't make you do that. And so this summer, since we couldn't make people post a fiscal, we saw a lot of landscape get installed and then all die. Then they come in and post a fiscal, and some of them have yet to install those landscapes. But I just think that with commercial buildings, especially commercial buildings, in the summer when the ACs are running, a building like this could probably produce 500 gallons a day. You think so, John? A building like this? Easily 500 gallons a day of water. That's just, right now, most commercial buildings are not capturing that water. And you could capture it in a rainwater collection tank. Collect the rainwater as well. And I think you would have enough water to minimally water if you were capturing 500 gallons a day just from the AC. When it's that hot and we're cranking out that much water, we should be putting it back on the plant material. And I've decided it's my mission to convince Austin Water Utility of that. So I'm on that. So that's it. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them. I don't see any hands in the air. She has a question.
Palms on your residents. What do you recommend doing with them?
Well, they can freeze as easily, and you've probably seen them. I'm not going to name certain businesses around town where they all froze, and they froze around this time last year, and they still haven't been cut down, but they look horrible. But if you have palms on your residents, oh, you don't, but they take a lot of water. I said just putting the AC line on their root system. Or your gray water, that's a personal preference, if you want them. But I personally wouldn't have one, but, Yeah, just try to take care of it. You don't like it? Oh, it is? Well, maybe it's so acclimated it won't, I've seen bougainvillea, acclimate, so... Anybody else?
I have another question about the palms. You said they're not allowed, so you're not allowed to plant palms at all in a commercial situation? If you do, they have to be taken out? Or?
No. Well, the commercial landscape ordinance is minimum landscaping. So once you meet your minimum required landscaping on a commercial site, you can install your palms. Over and above. You can install anything over and above what's required. So I'm sorry if that was misleading. I'm trying to get people not to plant palms, so I don't tell the truth all the time. I'm teasing. Am I done? Okay.